Welcome to Donna and Friends. This week we're going to visit with 103-year-old Marie Rainwater. Let's check it out.
Marie Cheryl Rainwater was born in February the 21st, 1912. Well, I was born on an old farm out north of Ripley that had been bought by my grandfather from the man who had made the run. And we still own two of the farms. I own one, and my other sister and a niece owns the other one. So we grew up on that old farm out there north of Ripley. Well, I didn't have any girls to play with. There were not a girl in that whole township. And so I played boy rules. I rode horses, I rode calves, and we went swimming and hunting and things like that. The little schoolhouse that we went to first was a rural school, and we walked 2.5 miles. And we were talking the other day about the snowdrifts would get so big they'd be over the fence, barbed wire fence, and we didn't realize how dangerous it was. But we had to walk this 2.5 miles, but if we could cut through, we could get there a lot quicker and it'd be a smaller distance. So we went that way. And the school was just a one-run school. It was taught by a woman at first, and then she resigned and a man came to teach it. And we had boys that was 20 years old there. Had an old heater in the middle of the room. It was no fun. And people didn't come and get their children. Everybody walked. And so we didn't feel any unusual thing when we had to walk. We raised cattle and wheat. And really, when the Depression came on, Dad lost everything in that Depression. And then he started building it back, and he decided to stay on the farm because really and truly, we had fruit trees, we raised turkeys, we've had cattle that we butchered, there were hogs there. There never was a time that we went short on food. And we didn't have much to wear. I think I had one dress maybe all year that was new. The funny thing about it was Ripley was a thriving town at that time. They had one great big store where they had shoes on one end, and over on the other end was all the clothing, and then the next was the food. And that's where we got our supplies, was go to Ripley. We usually went on, at first it was a wagon. And next we got a surrey. We thought we were real smart to have that surrey. And we'd go over there and buy lunch meat and make us sandwiches and have a picnic. It'd take us practically all day. We lived 5 miles away. And then we had to go over there, and you had to put your team up somewhere where they'd be fed and watered. And then we'd go do all this shopping that we had to do. And we usually went about once a week. Or Dad would go, and we'd stay at home and give him a list of what we wanted. Well, my grandmother went with us, and I always tagged along with her. I was my dad's little girl, and especially my grandmother. And I never will forget, I embarrassed her nearly to death one day. We went into this store, and they had all these pretty dishes at the front. And I went up to look at the dishes. I've always been fascinated with dishes. And I was up there looking around, and all at once I sang out, Grandmother, these are the damnedest, prettiest dishes I ever saw. Well, my grandmother in those days, people didn't use that, but my dad swore occasionally, and my uncles all dead, and I hung around with them, and I picked that up there. Oh, grandmother's so humiliated. She called me to me, and she's ready to whip me, and the groceryman came out, and he said, no, that little girl's heard that from somebody else. Now, don't you get after her too much. Well, then my aunt came back from California, and Mother told her, she said, I've done everything to break that little girl from swearing. Well, she said, I bet I break her while I'm here. So every time she'd hear me say a swear word, she'd say, Marie, Santa won't come to see a little girl that swears like that. And one day I mashed my thumb with a hammer, and I swore, and my aunt came to the door, and she said, the little girl won't be able to see Santa Claus if she swears like that. And I said, I don't give a damn. Oh, I was a little tom girl, I'll tell you, I was growing up. I wore a dress, and my mother was bound that I was going to have curly hair. She'd put it up on rags, and then she didn't want me to go out in the sun because I freckled. And so I would take this old sunbonnet off and lay it down where I was playing, and she'd come out, and oh, she'd be so aggravated at me for not wearing my sunbonnet. So my grandmother said, we'll cut some little holes in the top of it and take strands of hair through and braid them. Well, I couldn't get it off, so my father came by one day, and I was out there and crying. And he said, Marie, what's wrong? And I told him, I said, this old sunbonnet's so hot, and I can't get it off. And he took me in the kitchen and got a pair of scissors and got that sunbonnet on. And no uncertain terms, he told the two ladies, you're not to put a sunbonnet on this girl again. So my dad sort of took care of me. And it's a good thing he did, because they wanted to dress me like a little girl that looked really up sharp. I graduated in 1930. Well, I wanted to go to college. I first wanted to go to nursing school, and I had my application approved by St. John's. And my dad wouldn't hear to me to go off like that, you know. So I stayed there, and I wasn't going to get to go to college. My brother had just like a week or two from graduating from business school, and he ran off and got married. And so they said, well, he didn't stay with it, and you won't either. So I was not going to stay out there on that farm. So I looked around, and they wanted someone at the telephone office. And I went in there and stayed with this woman that had the telephone office. And I learned that real quick, and I just sat there. And one day, Mother called me, and she said, would you come out tonight for supper? And I said, well, I sure will. She said, your dad'll be in there in a little bit. And he came in, and he said, he talked to me, and I said, oh, how I wish I could go to college. And so I ate supper with him and had a good visit, and Dad took me back to this lady's home. And in a little bit, my mother called me, and she said, Marie, we've decided to send you to Edmond as a teacher's college. So Dad took me down there, and I carried a little tin suitcase with all the clothes I had to go with me in it, and went down there. Didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about college or anything, but I was real fortunate that Dad got me into a house for room and board, and this house had 14 girls, and most of them were seniors and juniors. Well, they took me up and enrolled me and told me who the teachers were easy and who were hard, and also they got me to going. Well, there are very few people that dated those days. You see, this was in the area of the Depression, and everybody, one little girl nearly starved to death, and I'd come back on the farm. I was a woman that drove back, an adult, and I rode with her back every weekend. And when I'd go, I'd bring back a peck of apples or pears or whatever we had. And Mother made a raisin pie, only it was mincemeat pies. And she'd take this mincemeat and pack it in half-gallon jars. So I'd take a half-gallon jar back with me, and those girls would wait up until I got back there, and I'd take a pint of whipping cream, and we'd whip that cream, and everybody ate this pint of mincemeat there, because it was just like a pie filling, and we ate it, and these girls, some of them got by on little of nothing. It was pathetic. And one time I decided to go home. It was just, I was lonesome for the family, and I packed that little suitcase and sat on it and was ready to go, and I was waiting on the bus. At time for me to go get on the bus. And a senior girl came back to the house for some reason, and she saw me in there, and she said, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "I'm leaving school." And she came in, sat down on the bed, and she said, "Marie, you don't want to do that, because you told me your brother left." And she said, "Now you leave." She said, "Do you have any other brothers and sisters?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, they're not going to get to go to school then, because you just quit too." So I just got my suitcase open and unpacked my things.